All right. So now that we got our mold clean, um, and we got it dried out, we washed it out. I used a brush to kind of get in there and clean anything out that was blood or anything that was stuck on there, and then I dumped it out and I let it sit by the fire upside down for a while and dry out. Now that we've done all that, we can go ahead and do a cast. I like to take a solo cup, cut the bottom out of it, and tip it upside down to cradle the mold in. And the reason I like to do that is because it'll keep, if you like were to clamp this into anything or let it sit, probably wouldn't happen, but you could distort your mold a little bit, especially if you clamped it in something. So I just like to take a solo cup to cradle that in, and it's actually pretty convenient to do anyways. Um, it allows you to move it around, and sometimes I like to spin this while I'm pouring in my mold. So what we're going to do is we are going to put a little wax in this. You actually don't really need to wax a silicone mold because Bondo won't stick to it. But I do find that it helps to, in these areas that like the eyes and the nostril areas, it helps your mold release a little better when you're pulling out your final cast. That way, because we really don't want to break our nostril areas off. And sometimes if you've got it really deep, the silicone really deep inside your nostrils, it'll break off. So I just like to take some. I like to use this. It's called, I don't know. I got this. It's Easy Release 2831. I got this from Smooth On. It's actually not very expensive, and it lasts quite a while. And it's just liquid wax. So I'll just take my brush. I don't want a ton in there. I just take my brush, and sometimes you're going to have to use a flashlight. And I'll take some wax on my brush, and I'll just reach in there and just kind of hit the areas. I like to get the fins in the teeth, in the eyes, nostrils. And you don't want to just pour this in and then pour it out, because what happens is you'll end up with too thick of concentration in there. Cast from your mold is almost always a clean out cast, which means basically any impurities, any dirt, blood, anything that you missed is going to come out in that first pull of your mold. So I usually do one, pull it out. Sometimes it comes out perfect. Other times it'll be rough. So I will take and pour another one almost immediately after. And a lot of times you don't even have to wax your mold, because there'll be wax left over enough to where it'll pop out pretty easy. So what we're gonna do is pour out some Bondo. I recommend doing this in a well ventilated area, because this Bondo is pretty caustic. And you don't need, depending on how big, if you're doing a duck, you don't need a lot of Bondo. If you're doing one of these, a bigger goose head, you're going to need a little bit more. I usually do probably, I'd say, 3 tablespoons. So what I'm going to do is basically dilute my Bondo with fiberglass resin. And I'm using Bondo fiberglass resin as well. You can use any fiberglass resin. I like this stuff because it's runnier than regular, so it pours into your mold and fills any gaps better than some of the thicker stuff. And I pour just about enough that I think is going to, I pour enough resin in there that I think is going to be adequate to fill this mold. And it's like 5 degrees out. So this Bondo is going to take a lot longer to set up than on, like I say, a really warm day. So I'm going to actually pour quite a bit into my mold, quite a bit of hardener into my mold. So because it's a super cold day, I'm going to use a little hardener, some of this cream hardener, and I'm going to use a little bit of this fiberglass hardener. Usually this is enough, but like I said, because it's a real cold day, and this is going to take longer to set up, I'm going to put a little bit more resin in there, just because it's still a little thick. Mix that in really well. And then we're going and I'm only going to put about 10 drops of this hardener in, the liquid hardener. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If it's, like I said, if it's a hot day, you want to cut this probably by thirds. I'm going to make sure that I got this mixed very, very good. No streaks of gray. And then what I'm going to do, just to make sure I have it mixed well, I'm going to pour it into another container. These little clear cups are pretty inexpensive, and I figure by doing this I can make sure I have a little bit of a clump there, so I'm going to get rid of that. By pouring into another cup, you're just making sure that you got it evenly mixed. So we'll kind of tap this so we can get some of those air bubbles out. And then we'll start with just get it started, and then we'll raise it as high as we possibly can. And why we're doing this is because if you can do like a really fine stream and as high as you possibly can, you're going to pop these air bubbles and at least limit the amount of air bubbles you get into your mold. Okay. Once you get it full, take it out of the cradle and just kind of bounce it. Squeeze it down low. And what we're doing is we're working air bubbles out of it. Sometimes I'll turn on my air compressor and I'll just set it up against the air compressor and it'll vibrate the air bubbles out. And sometimes you'll be surprised at how big of air bubbles pop up to the surface of it. And this, like I said, this will take a while to harden with it being cold. If you live in an area that rains a lot, it'll even take longer. Alright, so now that we have that finished, we're just going to put it back into our cradle and let it set. And we'll probably put this by a fire. You can see there's still air bubbles popping up, raising to the surface. Pretty sure that I got most of them. There might be a few that I have to come back and fix once I pull this out of the mold. But honestly, we're going to have quite a few things to fix on it anyways once we get it pulled out. Alright, so as this was curing, I let it cure for about 2 hours. Did some things in the meantime. One of the things I did was I went ahead and did the goose tail. Got it all nice and clean. This time I actually used baking soda and super glue to glue this in, and it actually worked pretty good. So I heard about it a while ago and I've been wanting to try it, so I went ahead and did, and it works pretty good. So I'll probably do that again. Now this is set for about 2 hours, and it's hard, but it's not all the way hard. I'm hoping that down in here in the bill area it's completely cured. It should be, because if this thick part is cured, then this should be too. How I demold this is kind of like when I do it basically the same way that I do when I pull the head out, the original head out. I just kind of work my hand around to kind of loosen it up. You're more of doing like a pinching motion, and the hardest part is going to be where your nose area is, where your nostrils are. So what I'm going to do is just kind of work this, pinching it, and then I'm going to grab my stick and I'm just going to kind of squeeze as I pull. You can break this stick off and use pliers if you need to, but I'm going to see if I can do it without. Well, the stick broke, so I'll use pliers. And when you're doing this, you don't want to just rip it off, because you will undoubtedly pull some of your thin areas of the silicone. You'll break it. So after I kind of get it loose just a little bit, I'm going to take and roll it around in my palms and do some more pinching and squeezing. And obviously this is the top of the bill, at least I'm hoping it is. So I know my nostrils are about here and here in the mold. So I'm just going to pinch that area on both sides and try and get that to pop out. And hopefully it is popping out. And then we're going to go ahead and just slowly work it out. And sometimes I'll let it pop back in, and then I'll do it again. And that's just working everything loose. And then before I get too crazy, I'm going to pull it as basically as I work this out. I'm just going to go in and out with it, and hopefully break everything loose and not cause my thin areas of silicone to tear. So this is my first cast, and like I was saying before, it's probably going to have issues on my first cast. So, and this one does. This has got some major issues. But I didn't get anything ripped in there. It's all intact, which is good. And you can see how the nostril, this nostril looks pretty decent, but then you flip it over and you look on this side and you can see it's got some major issues in there. And a lot of that's moisture that was probably in the mold. And maybe some air, but a lot of that's just moisture that was left in the mold. It's basically part of prepping your mold, but the good news is I think this is going to make a really nice cast. So after I've done that, I got everything pretty much cleaned out in here, and I can go ahead and pour it again. So now that we have waited for a while to let this set up, and how you know when your Bondo is set all the way is there will be no stickiness on it. And so we're ready to pull this out. And usually what I'll do is I'll come through with my fingers, or you can use like a screwdriver, and just break off all this flashing. The best part, because we get to see how it's going to turn out. Sometimes it's disappointing once you get this out and you realize that you have air bubbles trapped in there and it just doesn't look as good as you were hoping it would. But when it comes out really nice, the good news is we have a pretty nice cast. We got some air bubbles in here. We got an air bubble that popped out right there. We got a few air bubbles in here, and one right here where on the top of the nose. But we got great inner nose detail. And all that stuff is fixable. So what we're going to do now is fix all of our problems on this, and then we'll make another mold of it using, I'll probably actually use Pollo putty or some kind of a tin cure silicone. Before I do that, I definitely want to make sure that I have everything fixed on it. So you can see there's some issues, but we got pretty good web detail in there. And we got this bump here. That was because a BB had hit that. And we got an air bubble there. But honestly, it's definitely fixable. Our eye sockets are pretty messed up. And here's where all the flesh was. No matter what you cast this in, you're going to have all this messiness that needs to be cleaned up. So anyways, I hope this helps you guys and gives you kind of an idea of what you can do with 100% silicone. I figured it out, and I did this whole thing not counting my time. I did it for about $8, just because I got my silicone on sale and it was pretty cheap. So, you know, it's pretty cost effective. I will say that we're going to have time involved in cleaning this up and fixing all the mistakes, which isn't a big deal if you have the time to do it. And in the end, you're going to have a pretty nice product that you can use on all your geese. So this is after I've done some of the repairs on it. I went ahead and painted it white so I could kind of see if there was any other air bubbles that need to be fixed. You can see after you paint them, all the imperfections, like in the skull area. Trying to get the camera to focus, and you look down at the nostrils. How you can see, I got to do a little bit more repairing in there, but it looks pretty decent. Just maybe probably 20 more minutes of magic sculpt and modeling, and I'll have it a little bit closer than what I need.